fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1989. It was a good year too. It was the 80s. I like the 80s. That was my jam. Tonight we're talking about timeless fun, how our ancestors spent leisure time. Wow, how did they? And my question for you is, what do you think your ancestors did for fun? And how might it differ from your favorite pastimes? So I thought this might be an interesting topic. Yesterday we talked about how to create genealogy as art, and so this is kind of along the same lines, but in that creative mode of how to keep yourself entertained. Now, there was a time for some people out there that need to know this, where we did not have internet, we did not have computers, we certainly did not have cell phones, and we had to entertain ourselves. Because at one point there was no TV, and when there was TV, you had limited channels that were only on for a certain number of days, a certain number of hours each day. So you couldn't just plonk yourself down in front of TV all day. No. You had to entertain yourselves. So this is going to help be a bit of a challenge for you. So what were some of the leisure and entertainment things that our ancestors did for fun? You've got things like games and sports, traditional games played by children and adults. Well, for example, they had marbles. Oh, I miss marbles. Marbles are fun. I always enjoyed looking in the marble, depending on how size it was. And there were some colors I really, really liked, and some I just didn't really like. But I liked looking into the eye of the marble to see if you could see anything in there. And my brain would go off into different directions of, like if you're looking into this marble, what could it be? And then when the movie Men in Black came out and they show the galaxy inside the pendant that the cat is wearing, or it scoops out. Was it? Yeah, the little pendant was got the Earth could be inside one of these little pendants. And I was thinking of this years ago, the marbles, maybe this could be another world in there, another galaxy. So, you never know where the next idea is going to come from. Hoop rolling. That was always fun. Not hula hoop, but hoop rolling. Usually it was rolling a hoop down the street and you direct it with a stick. Sometimes you would use your hand, but most times they had like a stick that they would do. Stickball was another one that they used to do. They had a rise of organized sports in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So you're talking the 1800s into the early 1900s is when there's a big rise in organized sports where you'd have teams and things like that would get out there and play. And, you got the origins of cricket and rugby and I don't know what other games. So then cricket and rugby, the only ones I know that sort of was around that time area. Probably most of the other ones as well. Music and dancing was very popular. So popular instruments and songs in different eras that you had the harp, you had the, it wasn't called the piano, it was called the harpsichord, which was the earlier version of a piano. And women of society became accomplished in certain things. They had to be accomplished in dancing, they had to be accomplished in music, accomplished in singing, accomplished in writing, accomplished in reading, so that they could be very well-rounded with all of these different things that they could just sit there, and they were very cultured ladies. Not so much on the other side of the coin where you had the middle class to the poor people. They had to entertain themselves, which they managed to do, but they didn't get the education that the ladies of society got. So you had popular instruments, like I said, the harp, the harpsichord, the lyre. It was like a little mini harp that they strum across this way. What other ones were there? Oh, the violin was around during that time. The violin came into existence around that time as well. And then there were songs that were written and sung. And quite often the young lady would sit at the piano or the harpsichord and play their song while singing it. They'll play and sing at the same time, and somebody would be there to turn the pages of music for them. Or another times they would be accompanied by somebody on the instruments while they sang. And this was considered entertainment. They would have these big dinners, and then part of the entertainment was the young ladies coming up and showing their accomplishments. Dancing was a big thing as well. You had the community dances, you had the barn dances, and the dances were very much a social hub. Everybody came together, they talked, they gossiped. There were huge gossips back then. Huge gossips. Somebody new would arrive in the community and everybody knew. And they'd come to this dance and there were all these rumors flying around and gossip flying around about this new person in town. They had very big gossips. And if they heard some news that they had to tell somebody, they would go and visit. You had calling cards. You actually had cards with your name on it, so that if you called in and the lady of the house or the gentleman of the house was not open, you could leave your card to say that you had called. And then the thing to do was for the gentleman or the lady to call back and come visit with you. And so they just pop in. They didn't arrange days and times. They just popped in for a visit. So you also had, so that was the music and the dancing. And there were these big community dances. And the dances were not just, for one, well, they were for one piece of music. All the classical music came out then, but they were not the length that they are today, where they're in that 2 to 5 minute range. No, these dances would go on for like 15, 20 minutes that you'd be dancing around. And the women had their little dance cards with them, and the men would come and enter their name onto their dance cards, and tell them, which dance they were going to be dancing with that particular young lady. And this was how you would find your husband, was at one of these events. And it was just, I tell you, you kind of think, wow, all I had to do was just sit around. Oh, and handcrafts was another one as well that they used to. We'll get to that one. But the dances were very much a social occasion, and you could catch up on the news and everything else. And so you had those that were, of the society, and the refined dresses, the gorgeous dresses and everything else. And they had the fans and their dance cards. And then you had the other side of the coin, where they just got together in a barn or in the local tavern or anything else, and they just dance. No real organization to it. They just had a blast. Storytelling and reading was another one. Oral traditions were passed through generations this way. Popular books or magazines may have influenced the family culture, depending on when the magazines came out, or the books. And it was quite common to see people reading books of poetry or sermons. Not so much the stories. They weren't the writing of stories wasn't as popular then as the publications of sermons and poetry were. But you were an accomplished lady if you could sit there and read these things. And then you had the oral traditions that were passed through generations, the stories that got passed down from older generations to the younger generations. You also had seasonal celebrations like festivals, fairs, and holidays specific to religions or culture. And these celebrations brought families and communities together. You would have, back in the medieval times when they had the jousting, that was a huge thing, a huge sport to go and watch and be entertained at. You also had the dances the celebrations and the dances that came afterwards, that they would have afterwards, to celebrate the winners and that sort of thing. And didn't we read the other day something about? Oh, that was the peacock thing. Yes, the peacock vow. But they would fence or sword fight together, just as rehearsal and practice, and just as a light duel, not an actual life or death duel. They would go out pheasant hunting, hunting for animals and birds. Actually, that's coming up. I'm getting ahead of myself, looking at my list, going, hang on, back up. So you had festivals and fairs, and they had entertainers that would come along to these festivals and entertain the crowds. And then you had the people, just walking through, and they would have different booths that had the wares of local crafts. People would have their wares out for that. You also had theatre and performances. The local theatre, you either had a local theatre or you had traveling performers that would come in. You had the vaudeville shows, the puppet theatres, and early cinema. I mean, puppet theatres wouldn't just entertain the children; it would also entertain the kids. The children and kids are the same thing, Helen. It would entertain the young ones as well as the older ones as well. And Punch and Judy was a very common puppet theatre in the day. I don't even know if they even do any Punch and Judy shows these days. I think they were considered too violent for children. Because they were always hitting and fighting each other. But not only did you have the hand puppets, you also had the marionette puppets as well, with the strings and everything else. You also had the outdoor activities where they would go on picnics and nature walks. Some of them would go camping out overnight and things. They would also go on boat rides like canoe and rowboats. They'd go out on the lake in rowboats or on the river in rowboats. Gardening was both a leisure and a necessity. Not only would the high society have gardeners, but the ladies of the house had to learn about the garden and different plants and things, and they would keep journals with pressings of flowers and plants in there, and they would learn about the medicinal uses of these plants as well, if they had any medicinal uses. Flower arranging was another hobby that they had to, another accomplishment that they had to learn, and they were kind of responsible for the fresh flowers in the house. So it was both a necessity, and a lot of places that had their own gardens and things would grow their own fruits and vegetables as well. And some of them, like the lords of the manor, would have their big garden area, the orchards and things that they would then either give surplus fruits and vegetables to their tenants. They would also they may have canned their fruits and vegetables so they could have them during the off season. They had the cellars in those days, which were holes dug into the ground that you could climb down into, which were cold, even in the heat of winter. In the heat of summer, they were very cold. So that was because they didn't have refrigerators. Later on, they had ice boxes, and they had the people who would go and carve out chunks of ice and do ice deliveries around the town so that people could keep food cold to stop it from spoiling. They had hobbies and crafts that they would learn, like sewing and knitting and woodworking, and other ones, like the pressing, how to press flowers, how to arrange flowers. What other crafts could they do? Drawing was another one. Yes, that was another accomplishment. To be able to draw or paint was another accomplishment that the accomplishments of a young lady were always talked about, and the more accomplishments they had, the better the breeding. I'm just sort of like, whatever. And these hobbies also connected families as well and preserved cultural traditions, because you would have the older generation teaching the younger generation on how they did weaving or creating things with pottery, or sewing a certain way, cross-stitch, embroidery. All of those sorts of things were things that were handed down from the older generation to the younger generation. They would often sew their own dresses or create their own bonnet, do their own decorations on their own bonnets. And there was just so much that they got. There was a lot that they got to fill their day when they weren't just sitting around waiting for visitors. They were kept busy. And these hobbies and things that they did were not just to fill time. They also served a purpose within their household, within their community, within their cultural traditions as well. And then, of course, later on, we had the introduction of radio, phonographs, and silent films. And these technologies transformed leisure time for families. Now they were no longer just sitting around and talking and reading and doing handcrafts. They were also, they were now gathered around the radio and listening to what was going on the radio. They would quite often put the phonographs on, and they could dance to the music that was on the phonographs. And the silent films was just, another community event. Now, on the silent films, they would actually have live music at the films. It could either be a piano or they may have an orchestra. And they were the ones that provided the music to go along with the silent film to create the tension or the hilarity of it, the comedy, whether they were creating tension or creating laughter. It was the musicians that helped do that, because you could just watch a silent movie and you just got these people moving around. You got no idea what's going on, but add in the pianist and maybe a couple of other performers as well. And you could have the music that built the tension up or relieved the tension, all these sorts of things. So there was a lot of things that they used to do. And some of these things have still continued today. Today, we still have festivals and fairs. We have a lot of organized sports that goes on now then. Some of them started back in the 19th and 20th century and still continue today. Some of them are a little more recent than that. You've got music and dancing is a very big thing as well. Music has definitely changed over the years, but it's still a form of entertainment. You've got the concerts you can go and see. There's still a tradition of passing down family stories is out there as well. your popular books and magazines that that people can, for example, a father and son may enjoy reading the auto magazines together, or the hunting magazines, or horse riding magazines. All these, there's so many magazines out there. There's magazines for just about every topic, I think. Just about every topic. Not maybe all the topics, but some of them. But there's even magazines on history, on how people lived during certain generations and things. And so you can read those. There's even what was the one I saw? The Wild Wild West. The Wild West has there's a magazine for the Wild West about what things were like during the Wild West, and that sort of thing. They had gun shows that you could go and watch. Times change. You still have festivals and fairs and holidays specific to religions and cultures. And yes, these celebrations still bring families and communities together. So these are things that have, through time, the content may have changed, but the idea is still there. You've got theaters and performances with local theaters or traveling performers coming in, doing concerts, doing shows. What is it? What's the name of that outfit? It's the Chinese have this really cool dance show. I keep seeing commercials for it with the videos and everything else. And I'm like, I got to go see me one of those one day. Because it was just, the movements they were doing was just incredible what they've been able to make the human body do. I love going to the ballet. I love the ballet. I love musicals. I love watching plays. You don't have the variety shows like you used to. The puppet theaters are more things that go through schools now. I don't know if they still do. I know they used to when I was a kid at school. We'd have the traveling puppet shows that would come through. That's where I saw Punch and Judy. And then you've got the movies on in the theaters where you can now, you can even have your own movie in your own house with, big screen TVs, surround sound speaker system, and watch, you don't want to pay. I don't even know how much it costs to go to the movies anymore. It's been a long time since I've been to the movie. Let's see, the movies. When did I last? When Overcomer came out, and I was still living in the RV at that time. It was before I got Zephyr, so that must have been 2019. That must have been 2019 because I got her in November. Where she's not behind me, November 2019. So I went and saw Overcomer, and I even said to my friends, I says, the last time I went to the, I've been to a lot of movies over the years, but when I saw Overcomer in 2019, I had not been to the movies by myself. I've only been to the movies twice by myself. One was to see Overcomer, which was 2019. The very first movie that I saw by myself in the theaters was E.T., which came out in the 80s. So yeah, there was a longer, and any time between when E.T. came out and when Overcomer came out, I always went to the movies with somebody, whether it was with friends, whether it was with my husband, whether it was with family. I always went with somebody. And so when I went and saw Overcomer, to me, that was stepping out of my comfort zone, because I'd always gone to the movies with somebody, except for that one time with E.T. back in the 80s. So yeah, there was a lot of years in between those two events happening. But yeah, the content of the cinema has changed. We've now got talking pictures that they've got all this technology to make it even bigger and better and greater, and than it was back in there. And you've got vivid color in there, and you've got action, you've got computer generated animation in there now as well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just to think of what it used to be like. Outdoor activities, picnics, nature walks, camping traditions, they're still out there. Even gardening. My mum tells me almost on a daily basis when she sends me a text about what they did in the garden that day, and whether they put new plants in, took plants out. And I think they're in the process of switching out the ones that only last a year. Annuals. Annuals and perennials. I remember those terms. Perennials are the ones that perpetually flower every year, and the annuals, we've got to replace them yearly. I think that's how that works. I could still be wrong on that one. But hey, I remember two gardening terms. I'm pretty sure that the green thumb in my family just skipped me completely. My parents have great gardens. My dad's mum, she could grow just about anything. It was incredible what she could grow. But anyway, and hobbies and crafts like sewing, knitting, woodworking, embroidery, cross stitch, crocheting, cooking, baking, they're all still around. and quilting, and you will see generations sitting together, knitting things together or working on a project together, whether it's sewing or knitting, working on those together. My dad taught Brad how to turn wood one year. That was 2007. 2006, when we were last down in New Zealand was 2006. And then I finally got Brad to enroll in a woodwork training class that was held halfway between his work and home. And so on Wednesday nights, he would stop off there to do his thing. But that he was diagnosed with cancer in January of 2008, and his class was meant to start in February. So he had to give that one away, and he never got back to it. But I still have the 2 pieces that he turned with my dad. Yes, they're very, very special pieces, those 2. But, it was passing from older generation, passing down to a younger generation. And I even went down and got a couple of photos of them working together. And Dad told me to get out of his workshop, basically. I got banned from the workshop. So I just wanted to get some pictures. And I wasn't going over to see what they were doing because I knew I had to be, glasses and all of that sort of stuff. So I was over the far side of the garage, but I got told to get out of the garage. I wasn't allowed to go down there. I was banned. I said, I wanted to get some pictures. And Dad was like, nope, get back upstairs. I went, okay. I was 40 years old. I was telling him, here I was being told to get back upstairs by my dad, and I was banned from his garage. Okay. And then, of course, how technology has changed. You've still got radio, you've got XM radio now, and now you've got, phonographs. They are still around, and you can still play some of them, the antique ones, but now they're also bringing back vinyl records, and turntables and stuff are coming back. But, they've been available all the time. It's just, people have had huge vinyl collections, and now they're starting to bring vinyl back as well, which I'm sort of like, that's really cool, because I used to love listening to vinyl. And of course, we no longer have silent films. They're anything but silent. And, and then the invention of TV, and how big TVs used to be, these huge big boxes with this little screen that everybody would crowd around, that used to be in black and white. And I still remember we were living in Invercargill at the time, and we had gone to one of the department stores, and we were in the area, and I don't even remember what my parents were purchasing at the time, but I was standing there looking at these TVs, and my mum comes over and points to this TV, and she says, you see that TV there? I went, yep. She says, that does color. And I was all of 6 at the time. I was like, wow, because we've only had black and white at home. But she says, yeah, that one will, that one now comes in color. The pictures are all in color. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah. And I go, that's awesome. I was just amazed that this TV could now produce color pictures. It was a few years before we finally got color. But when we finally got color, it was sort of like, wow. And now you've got flat screen TVs instead of these big box. TVs came in cabinets. Nobody really wanted to steal a TV back then because they were just in a cabinet. And then you've got computers that have come on, and what they've done with the changing, and how they have changed things with social media and everything else, and how you communicate. And, so some of the traditional stuff they used to do back, your ancestors used to do, those things are still around. They've just changed with the times, and they've been upgraded. Maybe upgraded. Some things may still be the same as it was back then. So, so what do you think your ancestors did for fun, and how might it differ from your own favorite pastimes? A lot of my favorite pastimes were things that they probably would have done back then, like, knitting and reading, and the content may have changed. Instruments like knitting needles may have been upgraded. We've got sewing machines now, so we don't have to do those little hand stitching things. And yes, but those are just some of the really cool stuff that was around then. That's still, some of that stuff is still around today, and it's quite interesting to, when I'm sitting there knitting, I'm going, how many of my ancestors used to sit and knit, or crochet, or sew? And that's when I'm on my sewing machine. And there's my maternal grandmother used to be a seamstress, and so I was always very careful with whenever I'm sewing. I would always be careful, because I thought, if my grandmother saw this, she would be upset about how bad it was. So if I ever told her I made something, she always wanted to have a look at it to see how it was made. So I had to remember how, she didn't get mad at me or anything else. She just sort of looked and went, She's, here you could have done da 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 da. So she wasn't too harsh on me on that on that regard, but it was a lot of fun. And then my on my dad's side, my two of my great aunts, Auntie Jean and Auntie Ina, they were seamstresses as well. And I remember getting told, I never saw them do this. So when my two uncles, my dad's two brothers, got married, of course, my great aunts were there. But I got told by one of my aunts that what my great aunts, when I was getting married the first time, I had a friend of mine was making my dress, and one of my uncle's wives, my aunt, told me, she says, if Auntie Ina and Auntie Jean are going to be there, she says, they are going to pick up your dress at some point and inspect the underside of like the train. Are you having a train? I went, yeah, I'm having a train. She goes, okay, they're going to pick it up and inspect the underside. And I went, okay. So I let my my friend know that this is what happens with my great aunts. So unbeknown to me, what she did when I went in for my final fitting and everything else, the dress turned out absolutely gorgeous. It looked stunning. And but what I didn't realize that what she had done is that she said, oh, I need to show you something. And she said, I went and did something. I hope you like it. And she turned the train over, and she had lined the bottom of the train. And there were these little blue bows placed every now and again on the underside of the train. I said, this is awesome. And sure enough, at the wedding, we're at the reception. We're before we go into the actual reception room, we're in the pre-cocktails area. And my two great aunts came up to me, and we said our hellos and everything else. And then, of course, they both went behind me, picked up my train, not just look it up like this. They picked it up. Now, the cool part of my dress was that the skirt piece was one whole thing that went all the way around. And then the train was actually sewn into the side seam, into two of the side seams of the skirt, so that if the train got lifted up, everything stayed private. Somebody's playing with Gus and Bear again. I always think when she starts barking and running in her dreams, that she's playing with Gus and Bear, my two previous dogs. And they lifted the train up, and they were like, look at what's under here. They were absolutely amazed at the underside of this dress. And Catherine, who's the lady who made my dress, she was there at the wedding. And they said, this is amazing. They said, this looks beautiful under here. Who made your dress? They said, did you have your dress made? I went, yep. They said, who made it? So I took them over and introduced them to Catherine, and they just loved on her. They said, and they thought it was brilliant that she had put these little bows on the underside of the train and everything, and how she had lined it. And they said her work was exquisite. And yes, so my great aunts gave Catherine their stamp of approval. Which I thought was hilarious. But, there are ladies who have passed their craft down to passed the crafts down over the years and everything else. And it's just been a great, I miss the older generation, and, miss my grandparents, my great aunts and uncles, and the stuff that I learned from them and the stories they would tell. And even I only got to meet one set of my great grandparents, and I miss them too, with, just being around them. I was only young when they passed away, but I still remember times of visit. I still remember visiting them at times. So, but you miss the generation. So make the most of of the generations that are available to you right now. If you've still got I've still got my parents, which is why I'm moving back to New Zealand, so I can be closer to my parents and reconnect with them. And but if you've still got your grandparents around and great grandparents, and even in some cases second great grandparents, take the time to sit down and just talk with them. Learn about learn about their childhood and how they grew up and things like that. They've probably told you stories over the years and you've not really paid attention to it. Go pay attention. Maybe they've turned around and handed down some sort of craft or talent to you. Like I know my dad's mum she was great with woodwork. And my parents still have a nest of tables, and it was a round table that had the legs were crossed under the underside, and she had made little quarter tables to go underneath. Now my dad has altered that split across the top at one point, so my dad cut it across there and made two kind of semicircle ones. It wasn't exactly half, and they use the little quarter table. They still use the little quarter tables that she made. So there's still stuff around that grandma made. That's but yeah, it's looking back when you're talking about stuff like this, and you're looking back through your childhood. and thinking about time, things that you had witnessed during your childhood and stuff. It's sort of like, oh, that's right. Grandma used to do this. Granddad used to do this. Papa did this. Nana did this. Da, da, da. And you start remembering things that your grandparents may have done and thinking, oh, I remember spending time with them and learning how to do this. Or I spent time, my grandfather taught me to play cards. He taught me a game called 500. He taught me a game called euchre. He taught me to play chess. Did he teach me to play chess, or was that Dad? Might have been both of them together. But when we got up to my grandparents' place, the card game of 500 and euchre was, and then last card was a very popular game to play when we were all together. The chessboard would get brought out as well. Just the older games, and you guys call it checkers, we call it drafts. The draft board will get brought out, and that's exactly, the draft pieces will get brought out as well. And so we would play those types of games. Damn, I forgot all about that till just now. I had a very enriching childhood when I'm sitting here thinking about it. All of the stuff that I learned from my grandparents, the stuff I learned from my great aunts and uncles, the stuff I've learned from my current, from my aunts and uncles and my great aunts and uncles. And I had a very enriching childhood. Oh, I'd forgotten a lot about that until we started talking about this tonight. So you never know. Start talking about looking through this, listening through this, and start thinking about your own childhood. What did you learn, and who did you learn it from? Who taught you to knit? Who taught you to work with your hands in the garage with woodworking or fixing a car? If I wanted to spend time with my dad, would be out in the garage. I did learn to change oil. I did learn how to change a tire for my dad. And I did learn how to do the timing with the little strobe light thing. I learned how to do the timing on a car as well. That was a long time ago. Could I do it now? Maybe. I might need a refresher course, but you really don't need that now unless you've got a car from the time when they had where you had to alter the timing and stuff like that. But yeah, I learned a lot about cars from my dad. Still haven't learned all the tool names though. I still call them the thingamabobs and whatchamacallits. Although as long as my dad's not watching, this is a side note, I do know more tool names than I let on. And with that, I am out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6